Thank you, Abhi, and thanks to everyone so far. So we're going to have Peter and Brian come up as well. Alex, if we can try something on the fly, I'm a little bit stubborn. If we can go back to my presentation, maybe there's some latency in the network. I'd like to try once again to see if you have your apps ready, whether or not we can, everyone can share that if we can, and give Peter and Brian a chance to. So if you can try, I'll leave it there for a moment while Peter and Brian introduce themselves. Let's see if you can use the app to enter your under polling, and we'll let that sit. Maybe there's some latency. In the meantime, Brian and Peter, if you can introduce yourselves, and then I'll ask the crowd if they have any questions in the meantime. But I have some questions for you as well.
So Peter Guilfoyle, CEO of Northwest Analytics, have partners like Albemarle, Dow, and others, and try to bring value by unlocking the potential of their data.
I'm Brian Parsonnet. I'm CTO and one of the founders of Seeq Corporation. I've been doing basically monitoring and diagnostics in the process industries for a long time, since 1978. Today we call it machine learning, but it's had a lot of different names over the years, and I'm happy to be here.
Any burning questions right now? If not, I'll have a few questions. And then, okay, not yet. So, Brian. So I understand also that the querying engine and SME clearly work well and good tangible examples of using ML in other systems to provide some very tangible benefits. I understand there's some other things going on that might be maybe working on for further exploration, if you can expand on that.
Yeah, sure. So Q-Search is one of half a dozen tools. Our focus really is on bringing technology that is a rather sophisticated technology, but putting it into a form that the typical engineer can use. It's not technology that people want. They want solutions, they want ease of use, and that is by far the biggest focus. So when I think of Q-Search, it alone is a general purpose tool. You basically, by example, you take a whole bunch of signals and say, this is what I'm looking for, and this is what I'm not looking for. In the case of Duke, they said, I'm looking for precursors to a failure, and I'm not looking for normal operation. But it's a general purpose tool. You could say, this is what steady state looks like, take it off my screen. And now you're just looking at variation. Or you could say, you have some sort of arbitrary behavior that's anomalous. Here's the whole set of signals, it's in here somewhere, just go find it again. So it's a general purpose tool. What it does under the hood is really remarkable, but that actually doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is an engineer who knows what to look for can just say, find me that, and be happy with the result.
Great, thank you. Peter, what's happening from your perspective? What are some of the things that, as people think about budgeting, entering into maybe some RFPs onto some analytics and ML and AI, what are you seeing, and would you recommend for them moving forward?
So I think the best place for people to start is kind of looking foundationally. What do they want to do? How do they want to build an analytics culture that's going to be sustainable and that is going to expand across a single unit, multiple units, et cetera? And as Jonathan had shown, they unlock a lot of value and get multiple layers of an organization involved by starting with some of the univariate tools and then growing into a lot of the machine learning multivariate tools as well. So, a lot of the value exists by accessing through fairly simple, well understood analytics means, but the value of starting there is when you get to the more complex, maybe even the more elegant, I'll put it, approaches, it helps it helps them get more out of those tools as well. And again, analytics, thinking beyond When you look at SMEs can exist at the operator level, they can exist at the plant director level. And getting all the layers of the organization involved and helping them benefit from the analytics tools is a key motivator for a lot of the companies out there.
Jonathan, where do you think the next year or two, what areas you think you're going to be focusing on with the team, and any other thoughts as far as opportunities to go to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've framed up a little bit with the pyramid of what our focus is. And I think it's really trying to figure out how do we get everybody doing that? Because typically, with a lot of these analytics tools, or what I've seen, you might have research groups, or you might have a few engineers at each site that really kind of gravitate towards these. But I think as I hear people, and one of the sessions earlier today was talking about the workforce and like the upcoming students, and I've heard a lot of chemical engineering students fresh out of school or even still in school asking about, are plants and manufacturing doing data analytics, and are they looking at these things? And so there's this desire for them to like, well, I kind of want to maybe go work for Google or go work for Amazon, and to say that, well, hey, there's a huge opportunity in this field, and I think they're really excited. So our approach is, our standard for what an engineer is going to be this kind of in the near future. And so we're going to be training all of our engineers on thinking like this, and that they're going to have a responsibility. And I think our engineers have really focused on running the plants and continuing to run the plants, and then we're pushing that towards, okay, the engineer needs to be focused on improvements and bigger picture things, and then use the technology and the data to facilitate the operation staff to run it 24/7. And so that whole transition of bringing the operators and the engineers and those people up one more level is really what we're focused on.
Great. Brian, how about yourself? What are your thoughts over the next year or two as far as your priorities and what to tell the teams or encourage the teams to do what you think they should do?
Well, I think first and foremost, you really got to go back to, and I think, Jonathan, you might have said this in one of our digital transformation sessions on Monday, was really get to the what's in it for me. And really, number one, focus on getting them bought in, getting everybody from the top executive level all the way down to the factory floor bought into what's in it for me. But you also have to change the culture in the factory and with the factory, the plant leaders. And you have to get them to believe that the operators can also do the analysis and use the data in ways that are more meaningful, sometimes more than just red, yellow, green. We're doing a big TPM initiative across Owens Corning. It's been there for a few years, and it's one of our key, priorities in our organization. And when you actually look at some of those pieces of it, particularly autonomous maintenance, which focuses on the operator, there's a lot of pieces of where analytics can actually be tied into that to help them better understand and better maintain their environment, especially when we're talking about, the reduction of number of people physically in the plant and having them to do more so they're not physically standing in an area. So how do you get that data? How do you get it so they have enough time to react? And then where can I automate even? So I think our big keys are really to get to predictive, both with our assets and our processes. It's also to better enable automation, to handle obviously the attrition of the workforce as they age out, and then really to drive the productivity of our manufacturing to remain competitive as we go forward.
Great. Abhi, you hit a nerve in a good way on the comment of being able to push down or push to the plant floor the use of analytics and ML. Any comments on reception or to the point of encouraging, or as you say, as you've all been saying about what's in it for me, but also that seems like a kind of a daunting task in some ways, and it's just so powerful. Just love to get your thoughts as to how that people and culture, as we've heard in discussions and in the keynotes as well, that the people part can be so difficult. Love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks. So I have a small team, and when we first started our group, we didn't have a data managed as it's managed right now. it was in silos and segregated. And I have a couple of highly motivated people working for me, and they felt really frustrated that they couldn't go in and access the data and do everything they needed to. They had to go through the IT team, submit a ticket, and then the IT team would respond to the ticket according to their standard response times. And a couple days later, they'll get the response. And this was incredibly frustrating for them. And once we started moving to a more agile process, they could go in and perform all of their calculations on their own and see what's going on. And Seeq was one of the tools that they used, and along with a couple of other in-house built tools. And they felt really empowered, and they got ownership of their work. So it was pretty drastic to see the change in the motivation and how they came up with cool ideas and new ways to improve.
Ed, we have a question from the
Yes.
audience.
Please.
Hi, I'm another Brian, because there's not enough of us in the world, and we're all in one room now. I had a couple comments and then a question about the software that was used in the last presentation, but there were a couple of points that were quickly said during the presentation that Dow had to learn the hard way also, so I wanted to highlight a couple of those. One of them was learn the process that you're trying to model or predict, right? Don't just hand it to some data scientist and say, tell me what I want to know. The other one is make sure you pick leading indicators, potential leading indicators. Don't fall into the trap of just taking all your data and throwing it into the tool. Because if you end up with trailing indicators and then you attempt to take action on a trailing indicator, you just broke your model. So those are some hard lessons we learned just by trusting smart people to do things for us without really challenging the way they were doing it. And now that we've learned it, we have to go and make sure that the new people learn the same lesson too. So the question I have now is for the Seeq software, right? How tolerant is it if you accidentally put in a trailing indicator to rejecting that as a signal for prediction? And then also, the hardest part I've had in my career is matching intermittent signals with dynamic data to get a dynamic prediction of the intermittent signal. So, and that kind of looked like something that was mentioned in the presentation, and how does that work, and is that really what was happening?
So there's two parts to the first question about leading indicators. There's lots of different ways of using this tool. In this particular case, we said, can you identify what a fault looks like? That's usually pretty easy. So we explicitly said the training data was the hour leading up to the event. So if there are trailing indicators in that data, that's part of the process to deal with. So in this particular case, we had no retraining. The results you saw there were the first run. The normal use case is that it shows you all the results, and if you find some false positives or false negatives, you just click on them and it retrains. And the intent is that on a real-time basis, it goes through some sort of decision process. I think Brian pointed out that you have to vet your results before they go right to action. So in that process, it's very easy for any subject matter expert to identify a fault, and it gets better very, very quickly. So that's how you reject them, is by continuously training. And you also have long-term drift and things in your process. So if you expect to have a system that you're going to set in place and it's going to run for years, you never touch it again, that's probably not the right model. You really want to have in place some sort of continuous process improvement cycle. And that's a big part of our software, is it's in the hands of the subject matter experts, and this rapid iteration is a continuous process. So your second question was about the dynamics. The way Q-Search works is that it actually has a toolbox underneath it that's extensible. So we threw in half a dozen algorithms. We, as the developer, can add more, and we will keep adding additional algorithms. And the system can use any of them in combination and tweaks all the knobs available. Two of them deal with dynamics, And sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. But by seeing examples of this is a good find, this is a bad find, it learns from just that little bit of input which tools matter. And I think that addresses your question.
So, if I could add on, it's, I love the point that, Brian, you kind of scooted right by it, but that is the, these things aren't set and forget. Anyone who thinks analytics and approaching analytics is a simple thing to do, and they get it done once and you're good to go, you're good to go right then. But don't think that you don't have more work to do, because I mean, these things, you have to constantly come back, revisit, how do I improve how I'm using it? How do I, how do I get more out of it? How do I extend it to other processes? Understand that it's, none of these things, I know a lot of times they're just packaged up as these, magic fairy dust, let's sprinkle it here and everything's good. That's not the way these things work.
Good point. Yes, Preet?
Yeah, I have a philosophical question, and it's to everyone on the panel there, but there is another camp in my company, Gene Tong, I'm with Merck, a pharmaceutical company. There is a camp within my company that says that the data should go up to a centralized cloud, and the centralized IT data scientists, researchers, they should be doing the analysis working, as opposed to these very nice tools that you made kind of fit for purpose for manufacturing analysis. And so can you comment on that approach versus your approach? As a company, we're not going to support both approaches. It's going to be one way or the other. And I'm trying to tease out, what ultimately is long-term, scalable, sustainable.
Yeah, I can comment a little bit. At Albemarle, we have a multiple data analytics groups in the business side, that come from maybe IT background or just straight out of school data analytics. And they're very heavily involved with our data from SAP or your ERP system, financial data, that type of stuff, things that are more relational. But when it comes to process data and time series data, that's really where they struggle. And what we've seen, and if you probably talk to anybody, and Brian with his being in the industry for a while can probably tell you it's so different, the type of data, and they really struggle. And then they struggle, I think, with understanding that, that piece of, well, that data or that value that you're looking at the flow meter may not be right, and understanding what questions to ask. And so what we've seen at Albemarle is we've hired people from the outside that are data analytics experts to go solve that problem, and they spend months draining our engineers to try to understand the process, asking all kinds of questions. What's a control valve? What's this? They spend a month of their time asking these questions. They come back with, well, okay, we really couldn't find anything. And we've done that across different sites with different companies multiple times. And so what we're looking at is that's a month drain on our people, and that's our most valuable asset. So I think, and we've talked to our data people, is that we're separating time series, manufacturing process data from business data at the moment, right, with our approaches, so we can enable these people to do the things that they're already wanting to do, and we can enable these people, and then we're going to be finding synergies of working together. But I think if you can find one tool to do all of it, I think that's a big mistake.
Let me add to that. We're in fact doing an A/B test on this. So we have a wind fleet and a solar fleet. For the wind fleet, as I just told you, we are going with the approach of enabling the SMEs. For a solar fleet, we took the other approach. So we have our internal IT team with data scientists who don't know much about how solar panels work and how inverters work and so on. But they're great data scientists. And so we set up our internal team to interface with them, give them a problem statement, and they have this software release cycle, and they're working on it right now. So I can tell you that it's pretty slow progress, and I have no doubt that the end result will be good, but it's going to be so much slower than having the SMEs themselves go in and solve the problem. And maybe we need to look at it from a two-tiered approach. If you have problems that are likely not going to change so much over time, and if it's applicable to a wide part of your company, maybe you go with the centralized approach. But if you need a rapid response, if the situation on the ground is changing rapidly, then maybe you need to enable the people closer to the operations to react.
Yeah, I actually agree with one of the comments you made before about this is not set it and forget it. And what's going to happen is you're going to build this stuff in-house. Are you an IT shop or do you make medications and drugs? I mean, that's the question you have to answer yourself, right?
Discover and then manufacture.
Medication, right? You're not IT. So do you want to maintain that? And when you have various tools out in the environment, you got a couple up here, there's some others, various other, opportunities out there as well. And when you go and you look at those and you go, I can do the core 80-20 rule, right? I can do the core of it using these off-the-shelf tools, go really fast, as you just stated, as you stated, go really fast. But when we get into those really deep, more complex problems, give it to the data scientists. Here's all the things we've learned, by the way. Here's what the data is telling us that we have already. It's structured the way we need it structured. Now you can go do that deeper analysis. And that's how we look at it at Owens Corning, right? We got some data scientists. We said we're going to use the off-the-shelf tools. We're going to go real fast, identify all the things that we really need to identify. But there are these deeper things. They pull that structured data out of those systems. It's done a lot of the work for us, and then we go fast.
So I had a few observations as well. It's our belief that very often the data alone is just insufficient. So you could take all the data available in a plant and feed it into the perfect algorithm, and it will not be able to figure it out. So this boils down to missing context, and there's a lot of context missing. The normal operations, what modes of operation there are, the history of the device, what it sounds like when you walk past. So where is all that context? It's in people's heads. So Seeq's focus is not to mine the data. Our focus is to mine people's heads, which means putting the tools directly in the hands of the subject matter expert. And our experience has been, over the last few years, that it outperforms the black box approach every single time. I can tell you one anecdote, true story. We were invited into a bake-off at a company where it was a kind of the black box approach. We're going to send you some data, tell me what's wrong, and we refused. Didn't do it. We declined. They tried very hard to talk us into it. It went through a year-long program. It was $1 million project, and they're now a Seeq customer. It was a complete failure. So it's not to say that it's not good, and I happen to believe that the data science technology today is spectacular. People coming out of university and people who are well-versed in it are really incredible talent. But you have to bring that talent as close as you can to the subject matter expert, not divorce it.
So I would start with, what problems are you trying to solve? Because you'll end up, I don't think there's any, as you've seen up here with, with these three companies, there's no one analytics approach that's right. There's just the one that's right for the problem they're trying to solve. It's interesting that I hear your company's going to do one or the other, where I think what we see, the successful companies have a combination. They have a hybrid approach because they're trying to do different things. You have the local subject matter experts being able to use the analytics tools to solve their localized problems, but then you also have the need of the data scientists to do the exploration of the data, look across various operational units, because they're looking for and trying to solve different problems than the process engineer, than the operator, than the plant manager. So I would say it's folly to think that one is going to solve the problems that you have.
Okay, that sounds good.
I wanted to get your thoughts on whether we're overemphasizing machine learning and AI and kind of creating these false perceptions when really all of you kind of highlighted when it's successful, it's coming because the fusion of domain knowledge and subject matter expertise, and really where machine learning came into use is to automate the detection of things people already know. We often joke about, if you just feed a model power, voltage, and current, it might tell us back Ohm's law. So, should we not emphasize AI and machine learning as a destination, rather just look at it more as, and scare people off from starting analytics journey? What's your take on that?
So analytics are a continuum. As I said, there's no one right way to do it. Do you want to use univariate? Do you want to use multivariate? Do you want to use the different machine learning algorithms? Do you want to go beyond that? Well, what are you trying to accomplish? And I do think there are any number of vendors who do the manufacturers, the customers a disservice by talking about the whiz bang things. I think someone was talking yesterday about the sparkly things. Who cares about sparkly? Give me the tool that's going to do the job. I don't care if it's. I don't think you care. Any of you care if it's univariate, multivariate, and Kool-Aid flavor of the day?
Cheap and fast.
Well,
Yeah.
I think there's maybe a balance to it. So I'd actually say that you have to think about it like a portfolio. And so the way we've kind of done it is for sure machine learning and AI are big buzzwords, right? And that's, how much should you leverage the buzzword? And I think it's just enough to keep people excited. And so for me, when I was doing all the statistical process and when I did lots of other analytics, but all kind of univariate, solving specific problems, I also was wanted just something fresh, and so you hear all these buzzwords and I also had some additional problems I was trying to solve, and it was like, oh, I want to try that just because it seems fun, but I can't go drop everything that I'm doing that adds value. And so we might present on some of the things we're adding with machine learning, but a lot of the univariate basic things that we're doing, 99% of our success is there at the moment. But the real piece that we've focused on is with the analytics, right? And our approach, and this is just for manufacturing down to the shop floor, is to present it with some type of alarm. And the whole purpose is it not just to acknowledge the alarm, is to start a discussion. And so we're even writing, we're going through a global approach of saying that, hey, people need to be discussing these things more. Because typically what I've seen is that you have the A shift operator come in and he gets on shift, at 6 a.m. and the column is running like this. And so what he does is he says, well, I don't like the level here, so I change this. I don't want the reflex flow here, so I change this. And you go and ask him, and he's like, well, B shift, they don't know what they're talking about, so I always run it here. And then B shift comes back and they turn it back the other way. And so what we did is we said, why haven't y'all been talking about this? They just haven't had the platform. So what we did is we say, let's do some analytics. Oh, if something's changing, let's discuss it, right? Feed back your system into the information, and through that discussion is where we found the value. So I think you have to bridge and have a large portfolio of how you're using these for different ways.
So if I could just say a quick word, our focus, and I believe the right focus, is on engineering productivity. You have enormous expertise, you want to put it to work. There's always going to be new tools. The advancements in machine learning and AI, another new tools, but it's one of many things that are changing, and it will continue to change. So we say focus on the immediate value, and that builds sustainability and credibility. So I would see machine learning as an important part of the mix, but it is just another tool.
So where machine learning has real value is when we have huge amounts of data. So to give an example, and we haven't implemented this right now, it's next on our list of things to do. So we have vibration sensors at our wind turbines, And to make the most of it, we need to sample it, at say 10 hertz. That's the bare minimum. And we cannot bring it back to our centralized data server and process it. It's just too much data. So we need to figure out a way to put edge computing at the turbines and run machine learning models on it. There's no way we can have any operator standing by and doing that. So this is a real value of machine learning.
Well, we're at the end. Doesn't mean we can't discuss afterwards. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you. I think the recommended to be the buses start at 6:20. I think they're going to leave at 6:30 and phase back and forth for our event tonight. If the panel who is clearly given a great insight, if you're available for a few minutes, if there's any other discussions, we can take it here. But thank you so much for such a great job. Great insight across the board. Thank you.
Thank you.